Assalamu alaikum. If you want to watch new videos on our channel, then subscribe our channel and don't forget to press the bell icon. Moreover, for appreciation, like our video and share it with your friends. You can also comment below giving your suggestions. Now let's start today's video. Watt's contribution to English poetry. Tillyard has summed up Watt's personality in the following words. In Watt's character, there was that balance of antithetical qualities that seemed to mark the type: genius for action and refined scholarship, impetuosity and the restraint of gentle manners, and above all, high ambitions and modesty. He embodied in himself the Renaissance ideal of a scholar. He was a genuine poet, a linguist, and a musician. Watt was a pioneer in the use of autobiographical material in poetry before his time. Personal feeling had been seldom expressed by poets. He made his private emotions the main subject of his lyrics. It was his personal feelings which prompted his refusal to find himself to the code of chivalry. There is nothing of the timid self-abasement of the conventional lover. In My Love to Scorn, he bluntly justifies his revulsion of feeling as a result of his infatuation being ill-rewarded. He reminds us of the later Cavalier poets like suckling, rational, receptacle, argumentative, desirous to get a conclusion, or bidding farewell to the proud beauty. We have poems told by Watt's autobiographers that express his love affair with Anne Boleyn, later the Queen of England, but authentic evidence is not available. However, he also had a love affair with a court lady, Phyllis. Whoso lists to haunt, and They Flee From Me are the poems which depict his love affairs, which were ill-rewarded. In Whoso Lists to Haunt, he says about his mistress, fainting in follow I leave off therefore, since in a net I seek to hold the wind. The age of what is called drab age of English poetry. The term is not used for Watt, but it is for the age as a whole, because after the golden age of Chaucer, there was hardly any poetry worth writing. Poetic activity had been languished. Then Watt appeared on the literary stage of English poetry. He not only rejuvenated English poetry but also gave it new direction, because after the second half of the 15th century, the Renaissance spirit of Italy came into England. Sir Thomas More was the first literary and political figure, but his poetry hardly made any impact. It was Watt who used the Italian Renaissance spirit in a right way by giving new direction to English poetry. He not only gave new direction to English poetry but also endeavored to fuse two traditions, native and the other foreign, in his poetry. He was inherited by metrical forms and poetic attitudes, and two important forms by which he was influenced were the popular poetry and the courtly verse, and to this he added foreign elements. The foreign elements that deeply affected his poetry were due to Petrarch and some stylists, including Homer. Two very marked and contrary features they were for Watt: foreign models, as well as energy for his thoughts. Watt looked at nature from a different point of view and sought to express his feelings through his own heart. All his compositions, his love verses, epigrams, devotional meditations, and style, the order and force of his thought can be easily felt, but equally in them, the poet shows his awareness that his native language is not rich enough to express all his thoughts, and he humbly and with humility submits himself to the superiority of foreign masters whose manners he seeks and reproduces, and the consequence is that his actual poetic achievements are of unequal merit. He often aims at subjects which he ought to have avoided. He is only successful when his fairy genius can find a way for itself untrammeled by the precedents of art. Tillyard has summed his poetic achievement in the following words: What in his poetry pianely combines two elements, the native and foreign. He was the heir of an English lyrical tradition. He also let the Renaissance into English verses, but it is not easy to mark the limits. Through exotic ideas in exotic measures, he will sound a personal or national note, or conversely, he will sing the most artificially Italianate love longing in lyric measures inherited from medieval England. Watt's contribution to English poetry is very significant. He introduced and modified the Petrarchan sonnet in English. Petrarchan sonnet has a fixed rhyme scheme ABBA, 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 CDE, CDE, CCD, and it is divided into two parts: octave, the first 8 lines expressing an idea working around a metaphor, and the other part is sestet, the next 6 lines, corollary of the thoughts expressed in octave. Out of 31 sonnets which Watt wrote, majority are a close imitation of Petrarch. Only 8 or 9 poems are original or freely adapt. Original poem according to his own attitude towards love. In his adaptation of the original sonnet, he split up the octave into 2 quatrains and sestet into 1 quatrain and a couplet, final couplet. This is a great innovation on the part of Watt. Shakespeare also adapted this division of verses with a little modification in his expression of his emotions and experience. Watt was also the first to combine the alex and rhyme with the verse of 7 accents and 14 syllables, though it has since become obsolete. He also introduced terza rima, a 3-line stanza, and octave rima, an 8-line stanza in his epigrams, but these two did not find much favor. He also set the fashion of translating poem from Italy. Here too he is a pioneer. He was here translating humanist tradition set by early humanists who extensively translated from Latin. In his poetic career, he realized the mere translation of the Italian poems wrapped his own creativity. Also, the theme and attitudes in the original poems were often contrary to own attitudes and themes. For instance, the lover in Petrarchan poems must remain servile and never manifest signs of displeasure at the cruel attitude of the mistress. He demanded reciprocity and justice from the mistress and refused to be a servile lover, always sighing out his heart and shedding tears. When he adopted his own personal way in the original sonnets, his sonnets became interesting and forceful. Even some of his poems, after translation, underwent radical change. Now he only retained the framework of the original sonnet but changed the imagery and the theme. The result of this could hardly be called a translation. This process is evident in some of his satires and poems. Before this, satires and poems were mere imitations, but after that, they became forceful and original. These satires, which he handled with freedom, were written when he had retired from the tension-ridden court life of his country house. The opening of his satire of the mean and sure state shows vast lyrical style at its extreme, and it is high picturesque too. The moral of this style is conveyed in a language full of energy which comes straight from the heart of the poet. It also shows the poet's wide experience in the way of the word. He says here, "For grips of death doth he too hardly pass, that known is to all, but to himself alas. He dieth unknown, dazed with dreadful face." He also selected poems from two Italian poets. Here again he adapted to render them to English, but adapted his own purposes. He managed to give expression to his own spiritual hunger, and in the poems there is autobiographical interest for the reader. But with the passage of time, the styles and poems have lost importance and they are only of academic interest now. It is only by his lyrics he survives now, as the best of them embody his deep personal experience of life, both as a lover and as a courtier. His musical and passionate talent finds outlet in them. All critics agree that Wyatt's genuine poetry is contained in his best lyrics. These lyrics are in tradition of medieval English lyric, but this tradition has been considerably modified and enriched. The poetic achievements of Wyatt have been summed up by Corthorpe in the following words. He occupies a position in English poetry in some respects almost as important as that of Chaucer, a statesman, a courtier, and a scholar. And he said forcibly of himself, "Such hammers work within my head, that sound naught else into my ears."